Hello, good evening. This is St. Peter's Hove, and here we are going step by step with the Lord through St. Matthew's Passion account, working our way up to Palm Sunday. Now we've arrived, we haven't got very far in the last few days, but we're doing our best. I think it's good we should be slow. In fact, it's a really good sign that we're taking it slowly. We've arrived at verse 10 of chapter 14. Judas Iscariot, it says, one of the 12, approached the chief priests with an offer to hand Jesus over to them. They were delighted to hear it and promised to give him money. And he began to look for a way of betraying him when the opportunity should occur. So just two little verses there, verses 10 and 11. And gosh, these verses have really been gone over again and again and again because they're almost impossible to interpret. Well, first of all, the big question is why? Why did Judas do this? And well, the answer, I think, is because St. Mark puts this here. It's because Judas has just seen the extravagant gesture of the woman at Bethany, and this infuriates him. This is the straw that breaks the camel's back. He doesn't like the way Jesus is going. He doesn't want to follow Jesus anymore. He doesn't want Jesus to go down that path. He thinks he needs to be stopped. He thinks he needs to be corrected. Now, this is interesting because there are lots and lots of people nowadays who say Jesus Christ had some really good ideas, or Jesus of Nazareth had some really good ideas. However, he's clearly wrong about this, he was clearly wrong about that, he was clearly wrong about the other. He needs correcting, he needs updating. In other words, the Jesus of Revelation is not the Jesus we want. We want a revelation more in keeping with our own expectations and our own perceived needs. In other words, God must change, not us. We want God to change. We want him to be fashioned in our image and likeness, not the other way around. So Judas obviously clearly thinks he knows better than God. He knows better than the Son of God. He spent 3 years with Jesus. He thinks, oh, this Jesus, he's got a lot to learn, hasn't he? And so he decides he has to be stopped. And of course, the clue is in the name, Judas Iscariot. We always think Judas is a terrible name, but in fact, one of the other disciples was called Judas. St. Jude, the patron saint of hopeless cases, he's called Judas as well. There's nothing wrong with the name Judas. Iscariot, the man of Kerioth. Now, it's almost like, is it a surname or is it a title? Is Ish Kerioth? Kerioth is a town in Judah. Is he the lord of Kerioth? Is he the owner of Kerioth? Whatever. It's been pointed out that Judas is the only one of the disciples who comes from Judea. He doesn't come from Galilee. So he's not a fisherman. He is much more sophisticated. And maybe it's his human level of sophistication. Maybe it's his bourgeois outlook on life that makes him realize that he knows better than the Son of God. And then he goes to the chief priests with an offer to hand Jesus over. To hand over is to betray. So he goes to the parish priest. No, he goes to the chief priests. And of course, he has the entry into the chief priest. It's hinted. In other words, he is the man of Kerioth. He is rather an important person in his own right. He knows people who know people who can get him in to have an interview with the chief priests. And obviously, he'd want to go right to the top. So it's hinted. Unfortunately, it's a bit. The writers of the gospel never really give us all the details that a novelist would give, do they? But it's hinted. He's got the entree. He's got the way in, and they were delighted. Why were they delighted? Well, go back to the beginning of chapter 14. They say it must not be during the feast because in case it creates a disturbance among the people. Now they've got somebody who will hand Jesus over to them in a way that will avoid any outbreak of violence. They've got a man on the inside. In other words, this arrest of Jesus will be an inside job. People will come to arrest Jesus, but the person on the inside will make it so much easier. So just like when you have a burglary, if you've got somebody inside the house who leaves the window open at the appropriate moment, then the burglars won't have any trouble. It's going to be an inside job. They're delighted because it saves them so much trouble. So it seems wonderful to them. And of course, they're completely indifferent to the terrible suffering they're about to visit upon the head of Jesus, and completely unaware of the significance of that suffering. And he, that's Judas, began to look for a way of betraying him when the opportunity should occur. So Judas secretly is looking around, all around, looking over his shoulder, constantly on the lookout for an opportunity to betray Jesus. There is a traitor in the camp. Right at the beginning of the church's history, there was a traitor in the camp. Even, well, today, I wouldn't go and use inflammatory language saying there's a traitor in the camp or many traitors in the camp or Trojan horses. And even today, the allegiance of all the people in the church to the Saviour is not 100%, is it? Let's be clear. We want to increase our discipleship this Lent. We want to be more and more devoted to our blessed Saviour. We don't want to be fellow travellers, hangers-on. We want to be right at the centre of the group of disciples, heart to heart with our blessed Lord. Okay, I've gone on too long. All the very best. Have a good evening and goodbye from Hove.